Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today we are diving into definitely an underrated gem as myself and the good old Nicolò Grasso discuss La Chimera. Coming out a couple years ago, this is certainly, like I said, an underrated film. When it released, this was one of our favorite films of the year, but even with all the Josh O'Connor hype of recent, it seems like this one has flown under the radar. So today we're finally so excited to dedicate an entire episode breaking down just why we find the film to be so magical, and hopefully share this with a few others who have not seen it so far. Thank you so much for listening and watching the show. Now let's get to our full review of La Chimera.
Era un mezzo mago, così ce lo siamo portato con noi.
Qua.
Là sotto ci sono cose che non sono fatte per gli occhi degli uomini, ma delle anime.
Che spettacolo. È 2000 anni che ci aspetta questo.
Arthur! Dobbiamo scappare, lì fuori è pieno di carabinieri.
Okay, Nick, continuing our journey through female filmmakers, I'm very, very excited for today's episode, one of our favorite films from 2023. I'm going to turn it over to you first, because I think you're the stan of this movie. I think we both love it, but you're the one who's definitely seen it more times than I have. What are your opening thoughts on La Chimera?
To put it plainly, no nonsense this time around. I love La Chimera. I adore La Chimera. At this point, after 4 viewings, it's officially in my top 50 films of all time, which is in very good company of very eclectic taste that I have. But La Chimera is one of those films that is just special. I really like Alice Rohrwacher. I wouldn't say I am a stan of her work. I still haven't been able to find time to watch her first 2 feature films, Le Meraviglie and Corpo Celeste, in reverse order of release, actually. But I've seen everything else that she's made. Lazzaro Felice, Happy as Lazzaro. I've seen the short films, and I really, really like her. But La Chimera, it's the definition of a masterpiece, of career-defining, potentially, work. I hope she goes even bigger. She makes more unique projects in the future. But this one just worked in so many beautiful ways that I was not expecting. I watched this movie. It's the only movie, actually, tied with Queer as the movie that I've seen the most times in theater. Both of them I've seen 3 times. And this, my first viewing, was the first time I watched it at home, actually. And I love La Chimera because so many different reasons. I don't know. It's a movie that kind of defies genre. What type of genre is La Chimera? Adventure, but not really. Drama, but there's also a good amount of comedy. Is it a period piece or a contemporary, like timeless story? It's never really clear. It's one of those films that is magical. People talk about magical realism with Rohrwacher's work for good reasons, but with this one especially, it goes beyond just magical realism, and she enters the world of myths, of mythology. I am a massive, massive fan of Greek mythology, especially the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. And this film is essentially let's say, a sequel, a continuation of that myth, following a very, very depressed Orpheus as he tries to live, if he was not, slaughtered by the witches of the water, whatever, the Bacchani they're called in English. And yeah, no, there's a lot to talk about here, from the characters, the world, the way this film is shot. There's so many interesting technical elements to it that just gives such vibrant energy to each frame. And I'm so happy we're doing this. I love this film. I hope you do too, Carson.
No, I absolutely do. I feel like this is going to be a pretty easy podcast as far as trading opinions, because I think we're going to be in alignment here for most things. This movie's stunning. I mean, really, a smaller release. This director has done a lot of work. I've not necessarily seen a lot of it. I've seen her short films, and I saw her previous film before this. I like them. I would not say necessarily on a stan list. Again, maybe her older work would be more impressive, but didn't necessarily go into this with a ton of expectations. and just truly blown away. Like, it's a film that feels in the best of ways like a film from 50 years ago. Like, it
Mm.
does not feel in the slightest to me like modern cinema or holding the sensibilities of modern cinema. Not only does it defy genre and tone, as you mentioned, but it defies form, it defies filmmaking techniques. I've never seen a film in recent memory, I guess, rather, that is so playful with techniques, so playful with colors and shot composition. It consistently is playful in the perspective it takes. It doesn't feel like a film that just creates one gimmick and that's the gimmick it goes with. Continually, for whatever that scene requires, it is willing to try something different or go for a big swing, and every single time it lands. And all this, I think that is a really technically interesting and well made and fascinating, masterful film is held together by this foundation of just like pure raw emotion, to the point where it's almost hard to put into words some of the emotions within this film, looking at the power of death and life, of love, this idea that there is a power within these graves, there's a power within art, there's a power within intention and spirit, that in this physical earth, buried within this physical earth, there are caverns and there are tombs that are not meant, and pieces of art that are meant to never be seen by humans' eyes. There's a weight here and a respect here put to it that is very, very European. It's very, very unique, but it's stunning. I mean, you sit there and truly there are some moments that just are poetic cinema in a way that like you don't see anymore. You just don't see this type of poetry put into film or performance. Josh O'Connor, I've raved about before on this podcast. I will continue to rave about him here, but he's also surrounded by just such a perfectly quirky cast of characters. Every character here is so unique and fun and lived, but also there's a darkness there that we can even get into, like, but his character and what he goes through, tormented by grief, tormented by this power of being caught between death and life. It's stunning. I mean, it really is a stunning film, I think, in every regard, to where like this is her, like, it must be her magnum opus, because I cannot imagine her or any filmmaker producing something to a higher level than this in many ways. Definitely one of the most rather underrated, I guess, or underseen films of the last decade. Not a lot of people talk about this, but I think it is absolutely to the highest form, in a similar way to like where we talk about John Couture on this podcast. We have many, many episodes on, or we talk about Varda, or we talk about these very, very influential filmmakers that I think speak to the human condition in this really intangible but really, really powerful way. This is a prime example of that. Maybe if we want to start, we can get into the characters, because I think our main character of Arthur is a very, very interesting and fascinating character. What are your initial thoughts on him? I know you compared him to the Orpheus myth. How do you feel?
Yeah, is very complex. Something that I like about Rohrwacher as a writer is that she never goes for easy characterizations to make you like a character. Especially the introduction of Arthur looks like a bum with this dirty suit on a train. It shows an appreciation for beauty in the classical sense when it compliments the girls, not in any romantic or sexual way, but just like it mentions, like, the nose is like the one of the statue. But then, and this is one of the things that I love about one of the reasons why I love the movie, is that there's so many little details that I missed the first time around, that when the sock salesman, which is a thing that happened in some parts of Italy, just going around the train cars selling socks. He starts being like, "Ooh, what's the smell? Hey, yo, it smells like prison. That's the last place I smelled this thing." And Arthur gets very upset. And I was like, whoa, okay. First I was like, whoa, he doesn't like to be made fun of. And then the second time I was like, oh wait, he's coming back from prison. He doesn't have the ticket. He has the prison thing saying he's being released. He doesn't have the money and stuff, so he can travel. I was like, oh, okay. Just these little details that are already building character, backstory, setting, even emotions, feelings. I like the fact that he is someone who comes from culture, high culture even, but he's kind of abandoned it in a way, first for love and then for greed once he lost said love. He's not likable. Like, it's so interesting because he's someone you want to see succeed, but he's kind of ruining his own life as the film goes on. I find him to be incredibly frustrating, but the reason why he works is that not only does Rohrwacher have such strong emotions for him, such strong love and empathy for what he's going through, like you mentioned, the grief especially, but she also cast Josh O'Connor. And I was listening to an interview with her where she talks about just the fact that everyone loves Josh O'Connor and you want to see him smile. And so you spend so much of the movie just hoping that something will make him smile just a little bit. And it comes very late, almost too late in the story. I don't want to get into the ending and the spoilers yet. I think that's something we can say for later. But yes, a very complicated character. In a way, everyone is complicated, but more so than the other men of the Tombaroli gang, these gravediggers of Etruscan tombs, which is something that is not only, of course, real, historically factual, like this was the population that came before the Romans in Italy, um, but tombs are still being found to this day, like almost 3,000 years after, which is crazy. Um, but other than that, yeah, no, my other favorite characters also have Isabella Rossellini. We are big fans of Blue Velvet and Lynch. Conclave stands, woo, let's go. But no, I really like her character. She's almost like a Miss Havisham from A Great Expectations, kind of like in this decrepit house that symbolizes, just like she can't let go of the past. Everything is decaying. But the character of Italia, I keep forgetting the actress's name, Carol Duarte, who's not Italian, she's Brazilian, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Really interesting character, but I want to let you speak a little bit because I think we can have a conversation just about her and what she might potentially symbolize. There's so many different readings that one can have of these films through the characters alone. So I'm curious first how you feel about Arturo.
Well, I mean, I think you hit it right on the head. I think every character here is so complex in their morality and their spirit. That I think it's one of the. This is a film I would say that requires multiple viewings, and I think I could see someone on a first viewing feeling frustrated by these characters and trying to engage,
Mhm.
because in so many ways, as you mentioned, they're really unlikable characters. Even our main character, Arthur, he's like, he has this magical power where he can seemingly have these visions and get this feeling when he's on top of a grave. And he uses that to exploit these grave sites, even for a film that very quickly reinforces the power and the spirit of these sites. And also the power of grief and the power of death. He uses this to exploit and steal and rob and greed. And then you find out more and more details of him. And even as he gets more sympathetic, he continues to help the surrounding cast around him do these things, which I assume both of us, at least myself, I morally do not love the idea of breaking into these graves and stealing their artifacts and
No,
selling them for
no.
profit. It's a very complex cast of characters, even because again, their first impressions that they're super like fun and lovable and quirky. They're dressing up and they're taking these pictures and they have this little bit of like almost a family like camaraderie. But what they're doing, you're just so against, and slowly Arthur really comes to reevaluate that his position there in a way that feels very rewarding. But for a lot of this film, he is doing actions that you would not support of. And when he has a woman who is trying to, and there's a lot of interesting stuff here about gender. He's also caught between these two groups of genders, pulling him in different directions. One pulling him towards morally bankrupt ideas for greed and profit, one pulling him towards love and hope. But when he has a girl there and he's, what would your ex-wife think of this? And what would, like, these are not meant to be seen. He just tells her to kind of go fuck off. Like, it's a very complex character in that sense. But I think to your credit, Josh O'Connor is like the best possible performer for this role to carry this balance, because he always carries the sense of like sorrow and grief in a way that's very, very different than his character in Challengers, or other performances of him. I think here he really shows his ability to hold an emotional weight in every situation, whether he's showing happiness or whether he is showing anger, whether he's showing sadness, whether he's showing frustration. It is always with this sorrow tone until the end of that film. And we don't need to get, again, I appreciate that we can leave the ending kind of there. I don't even know we need to get into it. I think it's powerful and it works. Best experience for the first time from audiences who don't know what's coming. But I think they walk that line with him so well. But I mean, really the entire cast. Also with the women in this film, as you meet them, they are haunted, obviously, especially the mother, haunted by death and the unknown and events that have happened, trauma she's gone through. But also it's a source of stability and heart and life and support that he keeps coming back to. He keeps like getting pulled back to that house, right? He keeps pulled back to these characters even when he doesn't want to be. He finds himself drawn there, just like how he's drawn to tombs. So it is a very complex group of characters, but it's one that I think like always is exactly where they need to be for the audience. It never feels like the film loses track of them or loses where they're supposed to be, or the audience would feel confused because they're like, well, I like this person, but I don't like their actions. Like, it always feels so controlled in a way that I definitely appreciate.
Yeah, I also find it interesting how all of those elements kind of play into the larger mythological undertones. And I love that. That's one of the things that when I first watched it, kind of took me back a little bit. I was like, damn, at the end credits, there is a bibliography of literary inspirations. And it made me feel so good because I was watching it and I was thinking about. I'm a big fan of the poems of Rainer Maria Rilke. And at the end, there's these, amongst the bibliography, there's these sonnets to Orpheus, Eurydice, and Hermes, I think it's in English. I was like, yes, yes. But I think it's the first time I've seen a director mentioning the books that helped the research in writing the script. It was such a interesting way of approaching it. But it also goes back to the title of the movie, which is mentioned, I want to say once or twice in the thing, which so many people don't know what Chimera means or what it references. More generally, of course, it's the creature, the monster that's made up of the lion's head and the what's like a serpent's tail. I don't remember. Like made up of different things. That's a chimera. But also in Italian, it can be used, which is kind of the way that they use it to describe Arthur's visions, feelings. A chimera can be seen as kind of like a worthless dream, worthless pursuit, daydreaming potentially, or even just a utopia. So they say it at one point, like, it's just one of his chimera when he's stumbling around, near the basin, the water. And it's an interesting way of. Not only is it a catchy title because it has, for people who know, it's like myth, the creature, the monster, but also it plays into this his kind of endless pursuit for something that cannot be, which is reuniting with his lost loved. It plays into this feeling of a country that's stuck in the past, not able to go forward into the future. The only moment of future that we have is with this actual feminist utopia. Like Chimera is also can be a utopia, the feminist utopia that happens towards the end. I don't know, that feels like something that's actually able to bring these characters into a new world, a new future.
That's fascinating because it also has a genetic. I mean, I think the genetics term plays into the mythology term, where it's a cell made out of multiple different pieces and parts, similar to how in the myth it's obviously multiple creatures smashed together.
Mm-hmm.
I very much so took it as him being part of both in death and in life, multiple parts put together. But that's fascinating. I had no idea about that Italian meaning. Is there any like spiritualism that comes from that, or like in that reading of it, or is it just kind of like in Italy, just a random daydream?
there is the world of tarots,
Yes.
which I won't even touch with a 10-foot pole because it's scary, it's deep, and there's people who know a lot about it. I remember when I first watched the movie, I did some research about it. Some of the symbolism, even the fact that, of course, the original poster
Poster, yeah.
is the hanged man with him, and also the way that they shoot those moments of revelation that he has. It's always
Mhm.
upside down, like the camera turns on itself, and he ends up basically being hanged, like the hanged
There's also
man.
the tree near his shack, I guess you'll call it, where she says it looks like upside down. For
Yep.
sure.
Yeah. It's all those little elements, like you said, like the movie reveals itself more and more with each new viewing. Um, and what one thing that I do really like about her, the woman, the character of Italia, I see her as the true future of. I mean, in a more specific case, of course, we can say the future of Italy in a way, because Italy right now is, for a while, it's not been in a very good spot, culturally, politically, especially with, like in most of the world, growing racism, xenophobia, and whatnot. And so to have a character who is Brazilian, potentially legally living there, she's a single mother with two children. Her name is Italia. She has the name of the country she's living in. The other people, the Tombaroli, make fun of her. They keep, viva l'Italia, and sort of things like, yeah, hooray for Italy. Um, but she's the one who has the most will to just bring change. She's the most curious. She is full of joy. She's never shy. That's one of my favorite scenes. Which, to be honest, almost every scene I love in this film. Rewatching it, I was like, "Oh, it's this moment. It's this other moment. Yes, I love this part." Like constantly. But the moment when she's dancing at this beach party type fair, and she's so free, she's never embarrassed. She's just happy to do her little weird dance, and everyone goes along with it because she brings such good vibe. I love her so much, and I love that she, as an immigrant, is teaching another immigrant, Arthur, who is British. She's teaching him Italian with a little bit of broken parts to it, which adds to the charm if you speak Italian, because it's not perfect, but it's close enough. And she understands it. It's also part of going forward, going ahead. You learn the language. You have your children try to be part of this world, of this society, befriending other children. And I don't know, she moves me so much in a way that I did not expect she would on first viewing. But I don't know how you feel about her. Like she's I don't think I've seen her in anything else as well, Carol Duarte. Yeah, first
Mm.
time seeing her, honestly.
Yeah, I haven't seen her. I don't think anything else either. No, I mean she's fantastic here, and she's also. I mean, I think obviously the future of Italy conversation is going to be one that speaks to you more than me naturally. But she's also one that greatly impacts Josh O'Connor's character.
Mhm.
Right? She is the one who will very much so call what it is what it is. She will say what you're doing is a crime and that's wrong. Those are words that get repeated by Josh O'Connor as we get to the closer to the ending of the film, pushes him in the right direction, away from crime, away from exploitation, away from causing hurt to other creatures or other spirits or other beings, when he's suffering from his own pain. She is in many ways the kind of key and catalyst to his redemption and soul getting cleaned, I guess, if you want to say, in a way that she's very, very powerful. And yeah, I mean, as you say, a completely free soul in a movie where it feels like everyone is holding on to the past or is reserved in some way, whether they're sad or whether they are haunted, going through trauma, whether it is because they're living situations. She is the one who will just wake up and keep going and dance and not be tied down to anything, in a way that's very, very impactful for the film and the runtime. Like, absolutely. So she's great, incredibly great. But I mean, that's a fascinating, like, I'm just taking it all in about Italy because I didn't get that reading naturally.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
great.
it was so strong on the first viewing, and I've not seen, like, I've read some criticisms from some pieces of writing from other Italians, but I never saw that part mentioned. I don't know if I'm maybe
Mm.
looking too much into it. I don't know, but it was just so stark. I was like, she's called, she has the name of the country, and she's not Italian. Like, it was, I was like, this is so cool, just plain
Yeah.
cool.
Well, there's a lot
Um,
here about like it, like even these tombs. Well, yes, a lot of the focus I think is more on like a spiritualism within it. That is still like the history of Italy. Like 3,000 years ago, that was Italy burying these tombs. Now you're taking the past, putting it in conversation with the present, at least this film's present, and then the future through her character. I mean, that's an incredibly. I think if you watch it, especially under that lens, I think it would be undeniable that it's there. I don't think it's reaching for anything.
Yeah, I mean, we can even go further and kind of extend that to the way that we consume culture, history,
Yeah.
art, where it's completely disposable. The Tombaroli have an appreciation for what they see, up to a point, though, which is
Mm.
what I like. Because at the end of the day, they just want to earn money. It's like, yeah, it's the little kid's toy, it's the little vase, it's this, it's that, it's part of the funerary. Don't know the name in English. The, what you leave in the tomb for the afterlife. It's part of the kit. Let's say, terrible term, um, but one moment that never fails. I've seen this movie three times in the cinema. One moment that never fails to get a reaction, a strong reaction from the audience, which is the almost halfway through the film, and it's when Arthur's morality, let's say, changes, where the movie kind of like shifts gears, is when they find an unopened tomb in the middle of this waste waste field near the water, near the sea. And inside of it, they find not only a full kit for someone who was very, very rich, but they find a statue with an animal at the bottom, leopard, whatever. And the statue is beautiful. It's so gorgeous, stunning, moving. And then every single time, Carson, the audience gasps so loud. It's like, what are you? Oh no! What? Just utter disbelief. But at the end of the day, that's what they've been doing all along. They've just been finding art and reselling it because they need to make money off of it. And the moment they see that, they don't appreciate its beauty. They don't think, maybe we can leave this. They think, jackpot, also way too big to fit the exit. We need to take it off in chunks because that's what's important. And that's when Arthur has a change of heart. Also because, like you said, he just told to fuck off
Yeah.
to Italia. But also, he realizes what's happening. Truly, I don't know. That moment is so. There's so many beautiful moments, but that one is so upsetting.
Mm.
Maybe the most upsetting part of the entire film. Every time I see it,
Oh
and
my
it feels
gosh,
like the
then
depredation of art.
absolutely. Well, then after he's holding the head, it's like a decapitated, like dead body he's holding and grieving. I think there's a wonderful conversation within this about how art, especially in various cultures, and it's a conversation over the last maybe 5 to 10 years, has become very, very popular. Where you talk about the British Museum, as well as various American museums who have
Yeah.
taken literally like dead bodies out of tombs and displayed them, and this whole kind of reevaluation of that and a reevaluation of taking artifacts like these. I mean, you can look at these robbers, these tomb raiders, and like they're dirty and they're kind of these bad characters. They're these kind of almost like gangsters at times. There's some violence, darkness, and you are really quick to be like, oh, they're bad people. I would never engage with something that is tied to this. And then the woman is auctioning it off to American museums to put onto display. Like, this is the core of so much of how Western civilization, have digested and consumed the cultures of others. It's been in these dark, robbing tombs like this, that is nasty. And it's something that, again, has been talked about a lot. I think especially when it comes to like Egypt conversations, as far as mummies and taking like,
Mhm.
obviously again, they're literally dead bodies. I think that's been a big conversation, but it's one here that is extremely well handled and well done. But I also think like it is a little complex because there's obviously such power in these statues. I mean, I'm someone who, like, one of my greatest fascinations in life is statues. If there's an art museum that has a statue, like, I can spend all day. I literally spent all day at the Met Museum in New York City, like literally sitting there. I cried at certain statues there in certain sections. Like, there is a great power there. And I guess there is a nuanced conversation to be had of like, what is the line between, you know, you can see these artifacts and it gives you this appreciation and it has this power, but also what is your right when they've been there for 3,000 years, left for these spirits, left for these tombs, especially in this film that really gives a life to the spirits and to the afterlife.
Yeah.
It's not just that you're stealing these from empty rooms, empty tombs that just, oh, it's meaningless, it's just sitting here doing nothing. It's meant for the spirits, it's meant for spirit eyes. And there are so many little bits, like when they open the tomb and you see all the paintings on the wall and they like switch colors and they get old, like there's so much here that gives a life to that conversation that is really quite impactful. But there's a lot here about, I think, art in general and culture in general, that's really worthwhile. And it's something that obviously Arthur struggles with. I mean, he's from Britain. He was a British archaeologist. I believe that's the right term. He has seen like all levels of this production. He's been part of all levels of this. And it's a fascinating conversation, I guess, but one that I think, specifically putting it in context of myth and mythology and the afterlife and spirits, is worthwhile.
Yeah, because it made me think a little bit about the Mati Diop documentary, Dahomey, from last year, 2024, which tackles, of course, this topic from the perspective of colonialism. Goes back to what you were saying as well, with like the British Museum and all of these institutions that over centuries took advantage of colonial conquests and kidnappings, raids, genocides in Africa, Asia, and South America to steal artifacts and just present, often with completely wrong, racist, misleading captions and descriptions. Um, which is interesting. There's also, like, when I was staying in Berlin, there is a museum that is trying to reckon with this dark history by not only allowing free access to these exhibits of everything that was stolen, but they've also started conversations with museums and the people from these places where these artifacts were stolen, um, so that they can have a recontextualization of everything that is shown on display. How, for instance, they would they would always show like spears from certain African people and tribes, without saying things like, "Oh, they actually had rifles," you know. But no, it's easier to just say, "No, they had spears," you know, those cannibals, whatever, instead of recognizing that they're just people who had tools and they could fight back and kill many of these racist sons of bitches. But I do like, and I don't even know where I stand, to be honest, with everything that is present in La Chimera's portrayal of tomb raiding, essentially. Maybe because it is illegal, it's done dangerously, it leads to things like, let's chop off the head of the statue to make it fit the exit. Simply because of that, I am against it. But also, it's always one of those things where, yeah, like, I think it goes fully into the spirituality that you were mentioning. If those were objects made for the dead, they should remain for the dead. It almost feels profane and disrespectful to have like thousands and thousands of people see them, but also at the same time it is nice to see them. you know and it is part of the studies and the culture. But yes, it does feel, bringing it back to the main themes of the film, it is corruption of the soul, in a
Yeah.
way, of your soul,
There's also
to
an
take them out.
interesting interesting perspective here on like who gets to save that. Did you see the documentary Dahomey
I did,
from
yeah.
last year?
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
great documentary and conversation of this. There's also a museum near me that was called Museum of Man, now changed to Museum of Us, and they're really, really dedicated to like going through their archives, returning artifacts where they can to certain populations. And even if you go to the museum, it's not like they replace it. They'll specifically have like an empty case and they'll say, this is what was once here. This is why we returned it. This is why. It's like, it's very in that way. But comparing to Homie, because there
Nice.
is a conversation with a lot of these artifacts where it's like, well, the people who live there, who are part of these communities, should be the ones who have a say of what happens to them, right? Whether they're on display, whether they're not here. And yes, our main, Italia and Arthur are both immigrants to Italy. They're not from Italy, but like if an Italian wants to take these artifacts in their land from these people, I think this movie portrays that as being morally bad. I agree. And I do, when you get the sensation of this and the spiritualism of this, it feels like they're robbing. You really get this, like they're stealing from somebody, even though that person's dead, when you bring the spirit into it. But that just adds another complication of like, can these people really make a fair assessment of what happens to these artifacts from 3,000 years ago? Because it's not really like their artifacts. It really is like this completely other population. I think it's a conversation that a lot of people, and I get why, really want to have just it be simple, where it's like there's this easy answer, there's no other option or nuance there. It's wrong to take artifacts and display them. I think it is a more nuanced conversation because, as you mentioned, not only is it just like, I want to go see them, but there is great power in that. Like, there's a lot of progress and change that can come from showing other cultures and bringing these other cultures to life through like tangible physical objects. And I think that's a conversation this movie, it doesn't have the full conversation, but it's a great addition to it, where like if you were building a whole university course discussing this topic, you would show this movie and have it be an added perspective. But definitely an interesting one.
Yeah, like they also, just thinking about it and listening to you speak, they are taking them out just to sell them, just for monetary gain. They are stealing all those objects, and it is shown very explicitly, especially in the first grave that they enter, that they are stealing it from the common people. There's that very quirky guy, I don't know, old man, farmer, I don't know, that guy, the guy who looks a bit weird. There's many of those in Italy, especially when you go to the countryside and there is like that. But he's the one who says like, I can show you, I know there's like a tomb in this part, and then they just con him, like, yeah, we're not gonna give you shit. They find a way to play with him, um, and ultimately make money off of him. And you see it throughout. Like, they're going, at one point, they're in someone's backyard, when there's with the children, and they find an actual tomb with a skeleton in it. There's so many of these moments where, yeah, like they're not. I mean, they're not stealing from actual museums. They're not in big cities. They're doing this amongst poor people, and they're the ones profiting off of it by selling to this person who makes millions out of this object. Like, they keep perpetuating their own level of poverty in a way, because they're not making that much money off of this hassle.
Also, really, it's just because one person has magical power to find these graves. It's not even like the rest of them are putting in a lot of work. Yes, they like dig the grave out, but like
Moral support, okay?
yeah,
Someone has to cheer him on.
it's definitely a weird one. And then obviously he makes, I think, a very clear grand statement towards the end, and like one of the more breathtaking scenes I can think of, it's like poetry on screen for that moment. I would love to take a break here and talk about some of the filmmaking here, because I mentioned it in the opening, like absolutely
Please.
stunning. I'm so happy. Like this week on Blue Sky, there was the clip from In the Train with the lights that pass through and go down, and that was going, like, I saw a lot of people retweeting it, and I was like, yes, because there is like so many moments like that. Again, I've never seen a film that is so willing to experiment. There are scenes where you're in someone's POV, where you're like, if some are Nickel Boys, where you're like taking on their perspective. There are scenes where, again, when they open the tomb and you see the paintings and they switch due to visual effects, like there's so much here. There's the scene where they're speaking Italian and he doesn't really know how to do it, and they have a very playful way with like written words that flash onto the screen. Like it's a film that is so dynamic and engaging in the way that like it chooses to portray every emotion in every scene in a way that like I've never really seen done to this level. Again, it's not a film that has one technique or one gimmick, but consistently every scene provides something new on a filmmaking level. But it all feels very aligned. It doesn't feel disjointed at all. I think that was what, especially on a rewatch, because this was my second viewing. So sad I've never been able to see this in a theater. Like one day I will. But like it really blew me away. The filmmaking here on the core is just like, it's stunning. They don't make films like this anymore.
They made it 2 years ago, so there's hope. There's hope. No, I agree. I totally agree. And one other aspect that I really love about everything that you said, especially because it could have potentially been disjointed, as you said, but that the cinematographer, it was been the same one, I think, for all of Rohrwacher's films, Alain Louvard, and definitely most of them. More recently, ClapperCast favorite, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, I think, from the early days. She shot that film as well. But she's fantastic. And in this film, she used 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter, Super 8, and digital to kind of like put together all of those things. Something that I never noticed in the cinema because, outside of the Super 8, which is inherently just like almost boxed in one by one borderline. But watching it at home, I realized that, in some sequences it goes almost 16:9, full widescreen. In others, for most of the film, it's the standard. Don't remember the aspect ratio, 180s, well, whatever. But it looks great, just the mixing of these different film formats, because not only are they make sense technically when they're shooting inside the tombs. They switch to digital because you have high ISO that you can shoot inside with like the natural light natural light, like artificial light of the torches and whatnot. But it's a very low light situation that a film camera just could not handle while they're shooting all of those dreams, visions, memories. Is it the afterworld? Who knows? In Super 8, like the constant switching back and forth, it's so beautiful. Definitely impactful in the cinema watching it. But even at home, like it brings not even just the visuals, but the music, the soundtrack that Rohrwacher picks here. It makes the film feel in this sort of limbo where it's going from German techno, like 80s techno, to classical music, opera. It has folk songs, which I love. There's like this little sequence with the guy singing with the guitar, basically the myth, the legend of the Tombaroli, which again, not only cute and quirky, also gives you some extra backstory to the characters and what they do. Um, and yeah, also this has one of my absolute favorite end credit songs. When L'Uccelli, The Birds by Franco Battiato starts to play, I cry every time. Every time. It's just so moving. Um, yeah, like it's a technical beauty. Absolutely technical beauty.
I mean, I think when you look at the talent behind the camera, as you mentioned, with the cinematographer has done a ton of work we love. It's an editor who works a lot with Claire Denis. I mean, like, this is a all-star ensemble, I guess, when you look at this type of film. There's also just such a rich texture and like vibe, for lack of better words, whether it is the constant smoking of cigarettes, these shacks that are muddy and cold. There's so much coldness in the film as you're going down the tomb and you're just surrounded by the cave walls, which you're lighting up with your lighter, like, and you get the flame across these beautiful paintings. The texture of the statue is great. There's some amazing blue water here. Like, it sounds silly, but like very similar in a way to how like Luca Guadagnino fills his films with texture. This film is so filled and rich with texture. Even this white suit, which is just dirty
Yeah.
and muddy, and
Yellow by the
stinky
end.
and yellow, and is also smelly from the opening here. There is so much richness here in just this world and the world building where it feels like you're living in it with them. I find it to be a pretty intoxicating film. There are some movies that you just want to like, whether or not the tactile experience of living in them is pleasant, you just feel like you could live in them. And this is one where like I could watch this. I could put this on like a screensaver at any point, just have it play in the background and just be blown away by the textures and the smells and the feeling of the wood and the feeling of the ceramic and the feeling of the mud as they're digging with their hands in these tombs. It's phenomenal. I think it is a really great testament to this filmmaker. You've seen some of her older work, not all of it, but some of it. Would you say this is like an evolution for her? Would you say this is also present in some of her other pieces?
I would say it's an evolution. I don't want to be. I mean, it's also the first movie where she has a name attached as the lead. She has had like famous-ish actors in the other movies, of course, but this is the first time where she has a bankable star, let's say. Because I would say at this point, Josh O'Connor almost qualifies as a film star. I think maybe Knives Out 3 will solidify that.
Yeah. Was he
But
really that big of? I mean, when this was being filmed on an initial release, it was before Challengers, right? So he had God's Own Country.
he had God's Own Country.
I want it.
It did make Emma. Well, I mean, no one was like, Emma, oh my god, that's so...
Oh, yeah, he wasn't Emma. You're right. You're right.
It was, I don't know.
This is one of those where like it definitely, I think, lucked out in some ways by coming out after Challengers, with its wide release. I think the name,
Right, yeah. After Challengers,
I think the name drastically skyrocketed between the time of this film being made and the film releasing. It was like a really good sandwich of what came between those, because I don't feel like he was that huge of a star when it was being made.
I keep for some reason, like, even though I know they're different people, but I keep mixing him up for some reason with Paul Mescal. Just the two of them together. It's like, no, Paul Mescal was the name. It became the thing. Yeah. No, sorry. But Josh,
because
this was the 1-2 punch. But like, compared to anyone else who was in other movies, I know there's Monica Bellucci is in Le Meraviglie, I think, as a side character. But again, she's not the main draw of the film.
Probably when this was being made, Isabella Rossellini was the biggest name, like, during production, and then obviously
for sure.
Josh O'Connor. But
and even then, she doesn't draw people to the cinema. Poor woman.
For sure.
I love how old they make her in this. Like, she's looking fine and she can walk properly. But if you didn't know, like, imagine you're someone who hasn't seen her in like 15 to 20 years. You're like, oh my god, poor woman.
Well, even just imagine this and then Conclave. Like, if you watch them back to back, someone will be like, Conclave came out 10 years earlier. Like, yes. Wow, she went downhill quick.
It's crazy because she has the same hairdo as my grandma. I was like, it just feels weird. Also can't really walk at this point. So it's very eerie. You know? It's like, oh my god, it's made by an Italian who knows how these things truly, truly are. And it is interesting, like, because I never really looked into this. I remember Josh O'Connor mentioned it in interviews. He basically went from shooting Challengers, the young portion, to shooting La Chimera when he's like the dirty, and they're shooting in winter, to then shooting Challengers is more buff, to then shooting La Chimera when the weather is warm. It's so cool. Like, late 2021, early 2022 for him was golden shooting period, honestly.
And it's wild how different, again, I think the performances are, even put into context with God's Own Country, Emma, like he has a lot of variety. I still do not see him at all as being like a James Bond type. That is like an insane casting choice for me. But I just like, I really, I love this guy so much. I think he's such a good actor. Like I think quickly becoming one of those who has a lot of hype to him, but is like completely deserved. And I like that he's still out there making like these smaller films also. I feel like this is not one where it's like, after Challengers, a lot of people would not take on projects of this level. Or I know he just had a small one debut at Sundance, and Josh continues to do that. So I really stan him. But this is like, I think I cannot wait, because if he just continues to rise, if he gets like the Timmy treatment and he just continues to rise and rise and rise, I cannot wait for how many people are going to go back and discover this, because I think that will draw people. Still waiting for the Hot Summer Nights reanalysis from Timmy, but I because I think this is like golden. I think this is very, very impressive work from him.
I mean, he learned Italian just to work with her, with this director. That's commitment. That's commitment.
Very similar. Timmy learned Italian to work on Calling Me by Your Name, didn't he? He learned also piano. I think he was gonna quit acting. He was like, I'm just gonna spend 6 months in Italy learning all this for this one movie and then quit. And then now he's Willy Wonka. So good on him and good on Josh O'Connor. Do you have anything else that you have really pressing to talk about with La Chimera?
Yeah, we're not doing spoilers, right? So we're not entering the ending of the film, the final portion.
I don't think we need to get into detail. I mean, if you disagree, we definitely can do a spoiler section. I don't feel like we need to get into spoilers, but
I can do without.
Maybe do you want to talk about kind of generally the ending?
I wanted to say something else, which I don't know if it's qualified as a spoiler, but it is a character reveal around halfway through the movie. Let's say there's this person, Spartaco, keeps being named. It's the person they're working for. A connection, like the name, Spartacus, that's the one. I haven't really thought much about it. My brain has never made some weird connections as to why the character is called like that. But I love this movie. I've said it many times. We've had a nice conversation, Carson. This movie is not perfect, in my opinion, because of one person, and it's the casting of who plays Spartaco, who is Alba Rohrwacher, who is the sister of Alicia Rohrwacher, who I absolutely despise in everything I've seen her in. The bigger the role, the worse she is. And in this movie especially, she's such a sour note for me. The way she speaks, especially in Italian, because with the French, with the English, she kind of gets away with it. But with the Italian, man, oh my god, it's so, I don't know, especially next to Josh O'Connor, like the other guys and the other, like the Tom Baroli, are supernatural, naturalistic, not supernatural. Sounds different. And Josh O'Connor is Josh O'Connor, but her, I don't know, like it never sat well with me. Every time I see the movie, I'm like, all right, she's in this. Fuck. It's very personal.
I love her in this movie.
Oh, no.
But I don't know Italian, so like she could be giving the worst Italian in the world. I'm gonna be like,
I'm glad.
2 thumbs up. But also, don't you think maybe it's a character trait that like she's coming to Italy, she's like trying to exploit this? Like, I don't know, maybe she's not good at Italian. I don't know. Maybe that's a character trait. But no, it doesn't bother me.
Benefit of the doubt.
I really loved her. I was gonna bring up at the end here that like I thought she was like a great like star of this, but valid.
Yeah, no, like I've seen her in the more recent time where I didn't dislike her was in Maria, where she plays the maid. I was like, she's barely in the movie. She doesn't really have to speak. Great job.
Wow.
But in here, even in Lazzaro Felice, I remember, I haven't seen that in a few years now, but I remember her just being like,
I think her and Josh have really good chemistry, because she's also one of the few who kind of like can speak to Josh about Josh's past and about who he was and the kind of society he's running from. I love their interactions in this. Yeah, and she says like, you can wear this dirty suit, like you can try to change all this, but you still are who you are. Like I found all that to be quite beautiful, but I definitely could see that
I
if
like
you
the
are someone who
character.
knows the language.
I
I can
like the
see it.
character. I just don't like her. It's very
Valid.
personal. So it's just I very few. I think like we've had plenty of conversations now over the past 4 years, Carson. I'm not one who's like I fucking hate that person. Like she's one of
No, you're
few,
not.
probably lovely woman in real life. From all I know, she's very nice. It's very very good for her.
Yeah.
But like I can't stand her in movies.
We all have those people, so
We all do.
beyond
I
valid.
know. I know.
There's a
That was
reason this.
pressing. That was more pressing than anything about the actual ending. But no, the entire scene that she's in, like it's elevated by the fact that she's in one of the best scenes of the movie. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just say again, I think the ending, not that we're getting details, is quite beautiful. I think it really sticks the landing, especially if you're invested in trying to figure out our Josh O'Connor's character here. The emotional payoff there, I think, really is worthwhile. I really like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very bittersweet. Um, Very much the type of ending that is inevitable in a way. He has the opportunity to go towards the more classical happy ending. Everyone's happy, everyone lives forever, growing old and having a best of lives in a literal utopia. But that is not who he is. He would have betrayed his entire character if he went in that direction. He gets a taste of it, but he decides to go ahead with his fate, you could say. I had a conversation with a friend a year ago where he saw something that happens in the ending in a very conspiratorial way, as if in a much more. I don't know if we can talk about. There's there's this other grave robbers that we see throughout the movie who have the look of mafiosos. So straight up, they look like mob. They're not quirky, fun little characters who dress up in drag for Epiphany in January. Um, but one guy that I talked to was like, these guys headed out there for Arthur, and they wanted to do this and that. So they create this entire plan, and then they find a way to do that one thing. I was like, maybe. When I was like, maybe, but there's nothing in the movie that justifies even thinking about. Like, I can't even picture this guy watching the final 10 minutes of this movie being like, oh my god, the plan, the mobsters. Like, no, you're just focused on I don't know. It was an interesting read. What I don't agree with, even rewatching it, every time I'm watching it now, I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I don't see it, my dude.
Yeah, I'd have to watch with a viewing to be sure, but I'm not sure I would get that impression either. But valid,
Everyone takes something different out of the movie, that's what makes it special.
That's the beauty of cinema, right? We can all look at the same statue and see very different things. So, if that's what you got, that's what you get.
Yes.
I think we both overall just really recommend this film if it's not obvious enough. And absolutely, I think, gem of a film. I'm so happy we finally got to really talk about it. I know we mentioned it during Rapid Reviews when it released, but one I'm very happy we got to spend some time on. Sadly, my plan to get Jack to watch this through this podcast did not work. We'll have to figure out another way to do that in the future. But
We have to fly to Yorkshire and tie him down to a chair.
I also think he would just really like the movie. So that's the issue of it all. If you want to watch La Chimera, it is widely available on streaming and through Hulu in America, which also means it's available on Disney Plus, which is very funny. It was very
wow.
good
Okay.
loading Disney Plus to watch La Chimera, but that's the world we live in. With that said, I think that's going to do it for our review portion of this. For our question of the week, because La Chimera didn't win an Academy Award, but it did win. And also Cannes is coming up. I'll say there's some announcements that have been coming out about Cannes. So we're talking obviously about the big award, the Palm Dog Award, which La Chimera did win Best Moment. We're asking...
It's a good moment, to be honest. It's a fun moment.
It's a good moment. And if anyone does not follow the Palm Dog every Cannes season, I think you're really doing yourself a disservice. It is always one of the best, I think, lineups as far as award winners of the year. Nick, we're asking, what is your favorite winner of a Palm Dog award? So this could be the Palm Dog. It could be best moment, just any award the Palm Dog has given out. What is your favorite winner?
Best mutt, like the idea of people being like, let's just give a best mutt moment is amazing. Like sometimes the world is beautiful and wonderful. Um, Strong competitions. Like I was looking at it, I was like, there are some really good ones. I don't want to get lost in like 50,000 different honorable mentions. I will just say very briefly, of course, Messi from Anatomy of a Fall, great one. Also, Brandy, like played by Sayuri from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Great bulldog. But my favorite winner, and the moment I saw it, I was like, this has to be mine. The entire Canning cast from White God. White God is a movie that I was not expecting to like as much as I did. And the fact that they shot it, I think with no CGI, if there was CGI, was very minimal. It's an impressive Hungarian. Okay, I was gonna say Romanian. Hungarian film by Kornel Mundruczko. Um, Technically impressive, but just the dogs in it are outstanding. I haven't seen. Maybe you have seen it, but I was looking at the list and I was reminded that I'm yet to watch from last year, Black Dog. Have you seen Black Dog? That I
I
saw
haven't.
that.
I've been meaning to.
Oh, I've seen the trailer in the cinema. I was like, that looks so fun, and the dog looks amazing. Looks like a true star. You know, the
Yeah.
dog from Black Dog, the Chinese film. And yeah,
Honorable mention. I've been seeing the film.
from
Love
based
that.
on the trailer. Okay, based on the trailer.
There are a lot of good canines on this list. I
Animated
will
ones
throw
as
out.
well. I didn't say. Sorry. I
Yeah.
was like, that's an interesting choice.
No, totally. Panda from Lamb is a great dog performance. I just went through a Kelly Reichardt phase, so Lucy from Wendy and Lucy is phenomenal. Though I think she was better in Old Joy, which was not nominated. So alas, I will just throw out there. I think that's a little bit of category fraud there. The entire canine cast from Dogman, the 2018 film, have to throw that out there. Great film, some great mutts. My favorite part, I went to the screening at AFI Fest for that, and during the Q&A, this is back when I would stay for Q&As, big mistake I've learned, but they asked the main actor, they said, so because there's a scene where he puts a dog in a freezer, and they're like, well, how did you freeze the dog? And he was like, it was a fake dog. And they were like, oh, I never even thought of that as being a thing. They thought they did freeze a dog, which luckily they did not. I think the dog from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is great. I'm going to go with Uggy, though, from The Artist. I think The Artist
Classic.
is, yes, a classic. Should have been nominated at the Academy Awards. I think it's so funny that there was an actual push for that. A great performance, does outshine multiple other performances in that film. I think The Artist overall is pretty underrated, I would say, in a weird way, because I know it won Best Picture and such, but I think it's gotten a really bad rap for being more simple and being more of like an experimental film than being like a full Best Picture winning drama. But obviously Uggy is like the star of that, so I would give it to him. But
Saves the day.
Very solid list. Yeah, that's like also my favorite scene in the entire film. If I think of that movie, I think of Uggy saving the day in the fire, so I must appreciate him there. You can let us know your favorite winner of the Palm Dog, and in a month or so we'll have a new entry to this list. Also, Fallen Leaves, that has a good dog. Yeah, there's a lot of good dogs in cinema. With that said, let's go to rapid reviews. Anything we've seen recently that we haven't talked about on the podcast. Nick, what have you been watching?
I've literally seen two things this entire week. It's been a busy week, lots of work. Jesus, can't complain. Can't complain. Love to work as a freelance. I have to survive on the work that comes my way, but it means less time for movie watching. But I did manage to have, well, in terms of shorts, I managed to watch An Urban Allegory, which was last year's Alicia Rohrwacher collaboration with JR. Way better than the previous collaboration with JR. Just a fucking YouTube video extended into a short film, that previous one. Urban Allegory is very good, though. And also Muse by Paweł Pawlikowski. I don't think that's how you pronounce the name, but it's fine. The Polish filmmaker who made Ida, and Cold War. his first film since Cold War, which is crazy, but it's a very cute short film available on Mubi. A very playful interaction between a muse, a dancer, a model, with a pianist. That's all I'll say. Go watch it. But in terms of actual feature films, the only two I've been able to watch outside of La Chimera were in preparation for an episode of my podcast talking about, of course, The Zone of Interest. I've officially seen The Zone of Interest now. It's taken me this long. I was hoping for a cinema screening. I was never able to make it work over the past year. And I loved it. I thought it was excellent, timely, incredibly disturbing in ways that I was not expecting, despite everything that I'd read going into it. And also having just a little bit of hope in it, just a little bit of glowing light, you could say, that made me appreciate it on a human level. But yeah, it's one of few films that has left me speechless during the end credits, which are also incredibly haunting. The soundtrack by Mika Levy at the end, terrifying. And lastly, a movie I watched today in connection to The Zone of Interest, speaking of Germany's rise of fascism and Nazism. I'd always heard about Michael Haneke's The White Ribbon. I'd never seen it, so I finally managed to watch that. Also, it hasn't happened in a while. We're in the same week. I gave 5 stars to first time watches, but fuck me, what a film! Not only gorgeous and all those classics, like it looks amazing, the black and white, but just a very ambiguous and thought provoking look at how everyone is guilty of the violence that exists in our world, how the older generations are complicit in what's happening with the newer generation, and they instill hate and oppression and repression into young ones who then lash out in violent ways, if that's even what happens in the film. I love how Haneke never gives easy answers in his movies, which can be frustrating in one way, but I always find it rewarding because it makes you think so much about the way each of us sees the world we live in. It's not a nice world, sadly, but yeah, terrifying film as well in very different ways. So simple week, small week, but packed with quality. What did you
Yeah.
watch, Carson?
At least one of us has been watching quality
Oh
cinema.
boy.
Look, in preparation of Snow White, I watched both of the Amazing Spider-Man films.
Oof.
I never saw them, and this was like an excuse. Not that I really actually care about prepping for Snow White, but I was like, I've never seen these. I've wanted to watch them for a while. This is an excuse. Neither are good. I'll get that out of the way. The first one is very, very boring. Very standard setup to the Spider-Man character. I will say I think Garfield is excellent in both. I think Garfield makes a great Spider-Man. It is so sad that neither film gives him like anything interesting really to do outside of like a couple moments in the second one. I also think The Amazing Spider-Man is such a turning point in like, and we did a whole last summer, we did the summer blockbuster series where we broke down the evolution of the blockbuster. I think this film really is like a huge turning point of a studio rejecting Sam Raimi's vision and then saying like, we can just make our own. And it's like not good. And then Amazing Spider-Man 2 is, dare I say, even worse. It is strange because this movie has like 2 or 3 moments, which are like some of the best scenes ever of Spider-Man. They have the best web swinging ever in any Spider-Man film.
Oh,
which
the
is
opening
weird.
section.
The opening
amazing.
is incredible. It's turn that on, turn it off, 5-star segment right there.
Paul Giamatti's there as well.
Yes.
I mean,
you have the ending emotional moment is stunning, but the rest of it is just like so bad. It's so odd. So that was not a great series to watch. I rewatched all 3 Jurassic Park films.
oh wow.
Because I watched the first one, obviously 5 stars, incredible. We have a full episode on it. Then I watched The Lost World and I was like, wait, this one really slaps too. Like I really, really appreciate Lost World. Not perfect, like a step down, but still very good. And then I was like, you know what? Let's do Jurassic Park 3. And it's better than I remember. It is like, it's not great. Again, a noticeable step down. We don't have Spielberg. But like it is, there's something to be said about 90 minutes of nonstop dinosaur action that is like fun. Even if it's more visual effects, even if it's messy, even if there's some like of the strangest scenes you can possibly imagine as far as Jurassic Park. Alan, it's fun. It's fun. I'm sorry, sue me. As far as new releases, the only one I saw in the cinema was Soderbergh's Black Bag. I won't say too much. I loved this movie.
Oh wow!
I'm a big Soderbergh stan. I think Soderbergh is a fantastic filmmaker, especially like since 2019. He's just been like nonstop. I guess 2018, I think was he started, but like just nonstop making interesting cinema that might not always work. Like Presence, for example, didn't really work for me, but super interesting, super creative. This is such a devilish spy mystery drama. It's not quite a thriller. There's like no sequences of action here, but it is so good in its dialogue and performances. I don't want to say too much, but it's super rewarding as a mystery. Just had a lot of fun with it. And then finally, I didn't watch it this week. I watched this a couple months ago, but I can finally talk about on Apple TV Plus an upcoming series called The Studio from Seth Rogen, who plays a head. He just gets hired as the head of a filmmaking studio. And it's interesting because you'd expect with Apple TV Plus making a series about film, specifically clearly for like film Twitter, you would expect for them to stay kind of very universal in their references and in who they bring in. And they do bring in like Johnny Knoxville, who's very funny, and they bring in some of those kind of people you expect. And they have some really great conversations about like both how stupid cinema is, but also how much meaning there is in cinema and how rewarding it is. And also just the current film industry. But they also have like very odd, really specific references that most people won't get. The director of like Funny Pages comes in and like it just plays himself, and they have a whole episode about Funny Pages, which is this obscure A24 film that I don't like, but it was just like wild to have a whole episode of an Apple TV Plus show dedicated to this film no one has seen. The first like line of dialogue is about Paul Dano being a better director with wildlife than he is as an actor, and I was like, oh my god, I'm a wildlife stan. No one ever has talked about this since like 2018. This is incredible.
Wow.
So it balances that. It's very, very funny. Not perfect, I think, and also like you just have to understand and accept and enjoy the humor of this. A lot of people are not going to like it, but like I definitely had a lot of fun with it.
Is it a documentary?
No,
Is
no,
is it like Call My Agent? Have you seen that show?
I've never seen it. It's like 30 to 40 minutes an episode. It's like it's like a just normal comedy show,
Ah,
comedy drama. There's also in the first episode, I do need everyone to watch at least the first episode, because there is one of the the first episode, the premise is about them making the Kool-Aid Man film based off the Barbie film success. It's like their updated thing. And there's a certain scene. It's both it's about the Kool-Aid Man, but also it has a lot about Martin Scorsese in it. And they're trying to get Martin Scorsese to direct the Kool-Aid Man episode or movie. And there's genuinely one of the funniest concepts I've ever seen in a show or in a movie in this episode. It's incredible. And again, it's one of those shows where it's like it's about the Kool-Aid Man, but then you'll have Martin Scorsese come in to like act throughout an entire episode, and then the next episode is about this random A20. Like it's super unique. It's super good. I'd recommend it.
nice.
So with that, that's gonna be everything I saw this week, or I can discuss this week. Where can we find you on social media, Nick, if we want to hear more of your thoughts?
You can follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky and Instagram. Oops. No more Twitter here. I'm sorry. X on the app. Now you can follow me on Instagram and Blue Sky at NickyGrant97. Also on Letterboxd, read my reviews and everything. You can follow my other podcast that I do. Carson has been a guest and will be a guest again. Called Anatomy of an Adaptation. Where by the time I think this episode comes out, there will actually be the Wild at Heart conversation that we had very recently. So check that out if you want more Nick and Carson talk about good cinema.
Very good cinema over there. You can find me on Blue Sky and Letterboxd, just Carson Timar, words at Clapper and Buttered Popcorn. I have some interesting articles I'm working on for Clapper. I've really been hit with inspiration for like 3 different articles, all of which I think are pretty interesting in thesis. So I'm excited. Like I'll say, spoiler alert, first one is comparing Old Joy and Blair Witch Project as far as the power of nature. putting those films in conversation with each other, which is an odd thing, but it's something that I see. So just would recommend you keep an eye out for, I guess, weird writing from me. But with that, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll be back next week. Goodbye.